My name is Charles Hoak. Hoak, H-O-A-K. I was born here in Frederick County, Virginia, which is about 13 miles west of Winchester.
When were you born?
1932.
1932?
Yes.
What is your birthday?
March the 20th.
March 20th. How about school?
I went to a little school called Gore, Virginia. And I started there the first grade and graduated there. It was a grade 1 through 12. During my senior year, I was called for a physical examination. This was in 1950 for the Korean War. However, I thought just as soon as I graduated, they would draft me. Well, they didn't draft me until 18 months later. In the meantime, I went back took a postgraduate course at the new consolidated high school here in Frederick County that consisted of all the 5 districts. It was a consolidated school. So I took a business courses that year to wait until they drafted me.
When was that?
1951.
1951.
I graduated in 1950, but I took this postgraduate course, which was 50 to 51. So I acquired 5 more credits and was abiding just timed until they drafted me, which they did in September 16, 1952.
They drafted you not September 16th?
Yes.
You knew that there was Korean War broke out?
Yeah, that's the reason they gave me my physical examination while I was a senior in high school. Okay.
What did people talk about the Korean War when it broke out?
Well, a lot of people didn't even know where's Korea? You know, and it was sort of a shock because, 4 or 5 years, we just got out of the World War II, and so it was it upset the parents, upset my parents. And I'll go back, I had a twin brother.
Oh.
So this upset my mother, that knowing that I was going to go to Korea apparently, and but they didn't call him for his examination.
Why not?
I don't know. Well, at that time. At that time. So in September 1952, I was drafted, sent up to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania for infantry training. I was there 8 weeks, and lo and behold, they called my brother in for a physical examination. And next week, they drafted him. They drafted him and sent him to Fort Belvoir, which is a combat engineer training facility or post. The Army has a policy, I suppose they still do, if twins want to stay together, they can stay together. So then my mother put in a transfer, wrote to the Pentagon, and got me transferred to Fort Belvoir after I had 8 weeks of infantry training. And then
what was your brother's name?
Roy.
Huh?
Roy, R-O-Y.
R-O-Y?
Yes.
R-O-Y Hoak.
Roy Hoak, Jr. He was a junior, named after his dad. Okay. So I had the downside of that, I had to take all my training over again. So instead of having 16 weeks of training, I had a total of 24 weeks of training. So there, from that, we were shipped to, after our training was completed there, we were sent to Korea.
two of you together?
Yes, we stayed together.
It must be very hard for your mother.
Yeah. Yes. We didn't have the nerve to tell her half of the company or battalion we were in, half of them were sent to Europe, and the other half was sent to the Far East. So we didn't have the nerve to tell our mother or father that we were going to Korea. We told them they were going to send us to Alaska.
How do they decide half of the soldiers go to Europe and half of the goes to
You got to ask the Pentagon for that.
From your mother's perspective, she could save one son. Right?
Yeah, well,
rather than sending two of them to the
yeah.
battlefield.
But I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. If my brother went to Korea, I would have wanted to go to Korea with him too.
Did he volunteer to go, or
No, he was drafted just like me.
right?
No, we didn't have much say to that. But let's say if he had gone to Korea and I'd have gone to Europe, I wouldn't have gone to Europe. I'd have, no, change my orders. I want to go. I mean, the policy is twins stay together. Well, she was very upset, but like I told you, when we left, we didn't tell her we were going to Korea. They were sending us, they sent some of the guys to Alaska, which would have been, it's a soft, I'm saying it's not in combat.
Right.
So we told her, Mom, she was upset anyway that we were going, and we told her we were going to Alaska. It was the only time that I saw my dad cry when we left. So he was very upset about it too. We were three in our family. I had a sister 7 years older, and then there's just two boys, just Roy and I.
What was your feeling that you are assigned to go to a country you never knew before, and nobody knows America, also nobody knows about Korea, and the fact that the prospect that you might be dying there.
Right.
What was your feeling? How was your brother react to that?
Well, we were apprehensive. I mean, but remember, a lot of the guys that came back from World War II that we knew, they came back, so we thought our chances were pretty good of not.
But there are many people who died there.
Oh yeah, a lot of people.
So there are chances.
Well, you know your chances, but like the sergeant told us in basic training, there are more people got killed in Chicago at night than they did in Korea. 19, you're sort of optimistic. You look at the positive side, and mathematically, I thought I would come out of it okay. I've always been optimistic.
So where did you leave for Korea? From here?
When we got in Korea?
No. Where did you go and leave for Korea?
From
Washington?
Well, that was the other interesting thing.
Tell me.
The half that went to Korea, they flew them from Washington to Fort Lewis, Washington, to Fort Lewis, Washington, to get on the boat.
Yeah.
6 of us, they sent us down to the Union Station in D.C. and put us on a train. That was my brother and I and 4 others, and sent us first class. We had first class accommodations on a train, all the way to Fort Lewis. And then from Fort Lewis, we got on the boat. Not with the guys that we trained with, because they'd already gone. Okay? Then from Fort Lewis, we went to, I guess, Yokohama, Japan. At, what's that, Fort Drake, I think it is.
Yeah.
Stayed,
Camp Drake.
Camp Drake. Stayed in very nice barracks. And stayed there for a week or so. And then from there, they put us on another boat, and we landed at Incheon.
When did you arrive in Incheon?
Well, I sometime in January.
Of 1952?
Yeah, yes. And there we had summer clothing. There they fed us and put us in winter clothing and issued us ammunition and a rifle, put us on a train, and sent us all the way over to what was called the Punchbowl area. Oh, I meant to bring a map with me. And I went off and forgot it. Showing Korea. Sent us all the way over to the east, over to the east section of Korea called the Punchbowl area.
Yeah.
Okay? And there we stayed until the armistice was signed. And we were assigned to a combat engineer unit.
Tell me about your journey in the sea, in the boat. How was it? What did you talk to each other, your brother, and how was it? Tell me anything that you remember.
Yeah, well, when we got on the boat, we left at night, and right away they sent us to a fairly large room and to show a movie, just a movie for entertainment. As that boat was going out, it started doing this. Everybody started getting seasick. And you stayed seasick for about 2 or 3 days. That's terrible. But my poor brother stayed seasick the whole 17 days. I really felt sorry for him. It's terrible. You ever been seasick?
Not really.
It's a terrible feeling. You think you're going to die, and then you wish you're going to die. You wish you would die. You get that sick. And the same thing happened to him on the way back. He stayed seasick the whole 17 or whatever it was, 17, 18 days. But after 2 or 3 days, most people get over it. You get over it and you're okay. But some guys, I've talked to other guys. Yeah, he said, I just talked to a guy the other day. He said, yeah, I stayed seasick the whole time I was on that boat. And it's a terrible. And the sergeants or the sergeants in charge, they make you get up. They put you out on the deck. In fact, the first couple of days, they gave us a brush and made us clean the deck just to have something to do.
Yeah, right.
Just to keep your mind off of being sick. But that was terrible for 2 or 3 days. And like I say, it was worse for my brother because he couldn't shake it.
Now, 2 boys from Virginia.
Yes.
Arrived in Incheon for the first time, the country you never knew before.
That's right.
And you were headed to the front line of the battle.
Yes.
Wow, it's like a movie topic.
Yeah. As you're going, they put us on at night, something like 7 or 8 o'clock. It was dark. So you get on the train and you're sitting on these wooden benches. And as you keep going, as you're on your journey, you start seeing fireworks or artillery. You start hearing guns. So then you realize, hey, this is real. This is. You're starting to wake up and say, hey, yeah, this is reality.
This ain't gonna fun at all.
Well, you wonder what's going to happen. I mean, you wonder if there's a mortar or a shell is going to hit this train, and blow you up, But it did.
By that time that you were on the truck toward the Punchbowl, did your
the
mom
train?
know?
We were on a train.
Train.
No, she didn't know.
She didn't know.
We didn't write back until we got there. We didn't write to her until we got there.
Brother together there, did you say anything to each other?
Well,
survive, something like that.
No, we weren't that scared. It wasn't that scary yet, and we didn't arrive at our destination till that morning. And somehow, apparently, they do the shooting at that time, at night. At daytime, they stop shooting at one another. So when we arrived to our unit, things were quite peaceful.
Getting settled down?
Yeah, and we entered this company, and they'd been there, and they were used to it, and like I say, the artillery wasn't going off, so we weren't really that worried at that time.
How do they treat you as a twin brother? Do they know that you guys are twin brother?
Mm-hmm.
Any special treatment?
Well, no special treatment. I was sort of treated special, I guess.
Why?
Well, when I got there, we were assigned to a Company C of the 1343rd Engineer Combat Battalion. Mm-hmm. I've got some of that stuff in there I can give you. The first sergeant comes to us. Mm-hmm. The first sergeant comes to us and assigns my brother to the motor pool. And the reason they assigned him to the motor pool, he had been a mechanic. Used to be a garage right here, a Lincoln and Mercury garage called the George Washington Lincoln and Mercury garage. That was right here in this area where the bank is now. Mm-hmm. He worked there as a mechanic. Okay. And they assigned him to the motor pool as a mechanic. Mm-hmm. And the first sergeant says, well, where do you want to go? And I said, I want to stay with him. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, we'll make you a dispatcher, dispatching the equipment out, trucks, construction equipment, keeping inventory of the petroleum, oil, and lubricants, which was a nice, cushy job compared to what the other troops had to go out every day and build roads in the mud and sleet, snow. So I was a dispatcher for a couple months, and the first sergeant comes up to me and he says to me, the company clerk is rotating home. Would you like to be the company clerk? You're the only person I see that can type. Thank goodness I took that postgraduate course. And he says, I was sort of hesitant because I didn't want to leave these. We were assigned to a squad tent where 8 guys, and I liked the fellows, and I didn't want to be down there at the command post by myself at night. And he says, well, if you take the job, I'll make you a corporal next month. And you can stay here in the tent. I said, okay. So I was made a company clerk, which I didn't have to go out in the field and work on the roads, building the roads.
That's the rear area of Punchbowl?
Yes.
Was it
we were about a mile back of the front line. ROC troops. We had South Korean troops in front of us at that time.
I see.
So we were building roads up to their line. Okay.
So kind of much safer than the front line.
Oh yeah, I never was really up on the front line. We were about a mile back. So while we were there, we built roads along this river. Going up the front lines. And the only thing that we worried about were snipers. Shooting at some of the guys that were building the roads. But fortunately, we had nobody got killed. We had a lieutenant got shot in the arm once. But nobody, we were there for the 6 months, nobody in my unit got killed or wounded except that lieutenant. Every once in a while, the ambulance would bring out a civilian or a ROC soldier in an ambulance. And I saw that once with his legs blowing off.
So So
But
there was not that dangerous moment in your service.
yeah. One night, the Chinese, the communist forces, made this big push. And they tried to break through. And we had to stay out in our trenches a whole night with our weapons loaded. And we had a small airplane. The Army had a small airplane up above dropping flares. And it was so bright you could read a newspaper if you wanted to. So in order that we could see them, if they broke through, we could see them coming and shoot at them. But the ROC troops, the South Korean troops, held the line. They didn't let them come through.
So they did a good job.
Yeah, thank goodness. I often wondered what would happen if they had come through, okay? All these years, I always wondered what would happen had they broke through. Would we have gotten orders to jump in the trucks and go south? That was answered a couple of years ago when I went to the Kennedy Center to a show. It was about hold at all costs, Outpost Harry. Have you ever heard of Outpost Harry? No. Jot that down. You ought to look it up. It was a 9-day battle. And I think that's when, which was probably 20 miles from us. And I think that was when the Chinese made their big push, was during the Outpost Harry. General Eisenhower, or President Eisenhower, was president then. You know who was running the war, was actually running the war? He was. Because in this movie, Major General John Eisenhower, who was President Eisenhower's son, sent the order down, hold at all costs. In other words, there'll be no running. So that answered my question. When I saw that movie, yeah, we wouldn't have evacuated because the orders were to hold at all costs when the Chinese made that final push. And the reason the communists made their final push, they wanted to get back some land. You know where the demarcation line is? They wanted to move that line back.
Right.
So that's the reason where the demarcation line is.
Yeah.
We held it.
Yeah.
So that answered.
The name of the movie is Outpost Harry?
Outpost Harry, hold at all costs. It could be the other way. Hold at all costs, Outpost Harry. It was a 7 or 9 day battle, and there was a lot of casualties. The last division that came was a Greek division. That was they brought the Greek division up because there was, I don't know how many soldiers were killed in that outpost. So after the armistice, which was soon after that, my unit, the 1343rd Engineer Combat Battalion, moved back near Uijeongbu, the village close to Uijeongbu, and we stayed there for the rest of 12 months or whatever it was, maintaining roads and making them better than what they were.
So let's go back to your mom.
Okay.
Do you remember the day that you wrote back to her and saying that we are here together, not in Europe, but in Korea, in the battleground? Do you remember?
It's been a long.
Just give me the.
I remember. It's been so long. 60 years is a pretty long time. I guess that's what I did because we were here in Korea. I had to tell her.
So did you write around February?
Yeah, that would have been in February or something like that, and tell her that we were there, and so I guess things settled down.
Remember what did you write?
I don't really. I just I guess, told her we were here and we were safe. And we wrote, weekly, and I guess that calmed her down. I'll tell you, what really worried me going to Korea, in basic training, they would feed us World War II sea rations every Wednesday.
Yeah.
They were terrible, terrible. And I had a good idea we would be sent to Korea, and that worried me all the time. If I got to go to Korea and eat those sea rations every day, I don't think I'm going to make it. So,
but you're pretty spoiled.
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, my mother was a good cook. But when we got there, of course, like I say, we got there at the end of the conflict. We got fresh vegetables every day from Japan. And the only thing we had to eat was powdered eggs and powdered milk, and I can live with that. But we had vegetables, lettuce, tomatoes, radishes, good food. Never had a sea ration while I was there. And there was plenty of beer. But I'm not a beer drinker. I hate the stuff. But
what was the name of the beer?
All kinds, I think.
All different
I never paid attention to beer, but that's where I learned to cultivate a taste for it. I never liked beer, but the water over there was so chlorinated, I hated the water. So at the end of the day, I'd go up. We had a little enlisted man's club that you go up, and I learned. We had plenty of ice for some reason.
Ice?
Yeah, we got ice somewhere. You must remember we were in an engineer unit, and we had all kinds of plywood, plywood.
Yeah.
You know what plywood is?
Yeah.
And we could always take a piece of plywood and go down to the next unit and trade it for something.
Yeah.
And we had plenty of beer and plenty of ice, but I liked beer better than I liked chlorinated water.
Right.
So I cultivated some taste for beer, and I'd have maybe 1 or 2 beers in the evening.
How much were you paid?
Well, you start off like what? $65, $85 a month, and then as your time increases, your grade. I don't, but I'll tell you this. My brother and I together saved $4,000 while we were there because we didn't need the money. We sent all our money home. We had $2,000 apiece when we got home.
You made a fortune.
Yeah. If I had brains, I would have invested it in a piece of real estate.
Yeah.
And been a millionaire today.
Right.
But you don't have brains when you're...
Hey.
No, you know what we did? We came right here to this Lincoln and Mercury garage that said here and bought 2 new Mercuries, 2 54 Mercuries. I was pretty ambitious, and I went to Washington after I came back. Went to Washington.
What did you do?
Enrolled, well, before I went to the Army, I couldn't get a job, but the Department of Transportation hired me as a highway and bridge trainee inspector, okay, here in this area. So when I came back here, I wanted to go to Washington, take advantage of my GI Bill. So I went to Washington and got reassigned there in Fairfax, Virginia, as an inspector. Went to school. I enrolled at GW University for a while, and stayed down there, okay, and stayed with the state government for about 10 years. Then I went with a general contractor because there was a lot of building here in the area, still is, and was with this general contractor for 26 years.
So you made a good salary.
Yeah, yeah.
Could you tell me the day that you came back and back to your family? So how did your mom react? Your parents?
Well, they met us at Fort Meade, Maryland,
Mm-hmm.
where we met them. They came down to take us home, and I was shocked how much they aged.
Mm. Did
Dad.
your mom cry?
Yeah, Dad too. So I remember how Dad's hair had turned silver and Mother's hair was gray, and they were still fairly young.
But they worried about you guys.
I guess. Yeah.
Have you been back to Korea?
No. I've got a good. Well, I should go. It's it's a good
Revisit
deal.
Program. Revisit.
Yeah,
program.
I should go, I guess, but there would be things have changed over there so much. I wouldn't recognize anything for one thing, but I may go this summer.
Uh-huh.
I may go this summer, this fall. Korea's doing okay. South Korea's doing great.
What do you think? What do you think is the legacy of Korean War and Korean War veterans?
The legacy?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's going to keep improving, and the Korean people, are very appreciative that what we've done. I'm a little, I think in my thinking, Korea should be united. It should be one country.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you're going to overcome that unless you go up there and take him out. And it could be another bad war,
No war ever again.
You don't think so?
No, I hope not.
Well, I hope not.
Yeah.
But China, I don't know what China would do if war would start, if they'd do the same thing they would do the first time or not.
China is busy with their economic
Yeah.
development, so
Yeah.
they don't want anything interruption there.
I would think so.
Yeah, and so, this is the place where the American soldiers and military has committed itself for more than 60 years.
Yeah.
There's no precedent in American
That's right.
military history.
That's right.
60 years.
Right. It's the first time that the UN has stopped communism. The Korean conflict, this is the first time that the UN took action.
Yeah.
It's really a very important 20th century event because we never stopped Russia from taking those other countries over, like Hungary and these other European countries. Of course, they've all collapsed now. They're all back independent. But we did. Harry Truman, did make a decision. This is it. We're going to go in there and stop it.
But still, it's been very unpopular war, and people said it's forgotten. What do you say about that?
For what?
About the Korean War,
Yeah.
Americans said that it's forgotten war.
Oh, a forgotten war. Well, it was.
It's not been popular.
Right. You're right. It was a forgotten war.
Why?
When I guess people just didn't want to think, didn't want to. Apparently, while we were over there, and even then before I went, the worst part of the war was in 50 and 51, 50, 51, 52. It was on television, but people just didn't want to. They were busy trying to,
Recuperate from the...
Yeah, right. And they didn't want to think about it, I guess. And so when we came back, we didn't have parades. We'd come back and, where have you been?
Horrible, right?
So you go on with your life, it's just. And I've never really talked about it either since I came back.
Why not?
Well, you just don't. I guess for some reason you just don't.
What is that some reason? People say that, but I couldn't really...
Well, it's something you've done and you just want to forget about it, I guess. You just like my father-in-law who just died a couple months ago, was in World War II. He was a pilot at D-Day.
Oh.
And he went, but he never, his children said he never would talk about it. They'd ask him about it, and he said, I'd rather forget about it. It's something in the past. She said they never could, he was a college professor over here at Shepherdstown, West Virginia, and he'd never talk about but he finally sat down and wrote a book about it. And he didn't do that until the last 10 years of his life. He finally talked about his war experiences. So, I don't know, I don't know why. Well, when you talk about, some people do. Some veterans like to talk about it. And I would if somebody asked me, but nobody asked me, so you don't want to sound like a braggart. Well, I'll go back and tell you, after we moved back and maintained roads. The first sergeant that I lived with for 9 months in a small quarters in the command post, he got an emergency leave because one of his sons was having a serious operation. And the last 2 or 3 months I was there, they made me first sergeant of my unit, which was, at that time, I didn't realize, but now when I look back, here they made a 22-year-old soldier a first sergeant, and they promoted me over the platoon sergeants that had more time and more rank than I had. So I guess I was doing something right. And, of course, my twin brother, I shortly made him a motor pool sergeant.
Oh.
So we both came home as staff sergeants.
There is a nepotism here, huh?
Yeah.
Brothers helping brothers,
Yeah.
promoting, right?
That's right.
Is he older or younger?
He's 20 minutes older, but he died. He's been dead 14 years. He got prostate cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So.
But you must be very special to each other.
Oh well, yeah.
You were in the battlefield together and survived.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
stayed all together all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Charles Hoak.
Hoak.
And then this is the medal.
Yes.
From Korean government.
Well, thank you.
Yeah?
Thank you very much. That's very nice.